Hello everyone, it's Dee here from the UK, from Manchester in the UK, not Manchester in the USA. It usually gets publicised, Recovery Live, when myself and people from the UK are going to be on, and as a UK takeover. But we are all brothers and sisters, so this is hands across the pond to all be together. I'm just delighted to be here with you. For those missing Tom, he'll be back again next week, and he's not able to come today. But myself, Dee Cunniff, I'm one of the leaders for Came to Believe. We run retreats here all over the UK, and I particularly am involved with having set up the Kent retreats, which run a couple of times a year, and the North Pennines retreats, which we now have twice a year now, the Hertfordshire retreats, which are a couple of times as well. So it's those are particularly my background. That's why I'm here. I came to my first retreat in 2004, 2005, and recovered from alcoholism and other things. So that's why I'm here. What Clarence might call my qualification for actually being part of Came to Believe, because I've been through the program myself, the 12 steps. So hello to everybody. I'm looking at all the comments and stuff that are coming in. There's some links there, some of the different dates in the UK. I'm also, please, look at the dates that are in the USA. As I say, we're brothers and sisters across the pond. So come and be. Have a look at those as well, and those will be put up to those dates from Came to Believe Recovery.org, the retreats there, and the retreats all come from the same source of what Clarence Snyder started up in 1966 and passed over to our spiritual lead, Steve Foreman, and his wife, and that they would continue these retreats over the years. And here we are nearly in 2023, still running those retreats. So it's just absolutely fantastic that is happening, and people can go through the steps and that they can recover. So I'm just wanted to just say that some of you may have seen over the last week that there was a tribute to a lovely lady called Liz Rogers, who I met when I went over to America to the retreats, and stayed at with the people that were involved with starting the retreats originally, like people like Steve Foreman, like Sue Foreman, and various other people, and spent a few days with Liz on a couple of occasions, and we had an amazing honouring of her last week, which was just a great experience. And if you haven't had a look, just go into cametobelieverecovery.org and into our Facebook page, and you'll be able to see there the tribute that we did. So Liz was able to see what we did, and apparently was really, she reacted to it, was really pleased to see it. And but sadly, she actually passed away last weekend. So I just wanted to say that we honoured her, and she has now sadly passed. So bless her, and peace to her, and peace for her to be to be with her creator, to be with God, and which she will be in peace, and with great joy she'll be with him, but we will miss her. So anyway, I after that, which is sad news, but I'm just so delighted she got to see our honouring of her. So if you could perhaps go, if you want to go and see, as I say, just look in on the Facebook page and you'll see the tribute to her, and it's a joyful thing to see. Now this week we are looking at stigma and the cultural attitudes towards addiction. And in the light of that, I have invited somebody that you guys have met before, who is Vanessa Linney, who is also has been to retreats. So I'll get her to introduce herself, and you know, she's been to retreats, 12-step recovery, sponsors people, and has been, you know, has been recovered for a long time. And so I'd like to invite her on now, because we're going to have a little bit of an exploration. Hello, Vanessa.
Hi. Pleased to be here. Pleased to see you all.
Yeah, it's good to see you as well.
Yes.
I'm going to just say that you there with your bare arms, and we are in the UK where it's been minus 10 degrees.
Oh.
Had this complete freeze out, and I in fact have taken like a big cardigan off, and I've got big boots on with sheepskin in the inside and socks, and you're sat there like beautifully warm. And you said something about needing to open the window so that you could let the heat in. Is that correct?
Yes, because they build the properties here to keep the heat out. So when it gets colder, which in our mind, it's about 22 degrees, so it's got cold here now. So we open the window to let the air in.
Okay.
The warm air.
So there you go. So it is warm. And we're cold. So some are warm and some are cold in this world. I don't know. I think that Tom's was pretty cold in America, and it's very similar climate, I think, you know, like in New York and around that area, New Jersey, where Tom lives, and you know, over in the UK quite often. But I don't think he's having I think those guys are not having a freeze like we're having here. But anyway, you're in Dubai, and what year did you go to your first retreat, Vanessa?
Oh, don't ask me that. Well, I'm recovered now for 15 years, so probably about 13 years ago, to the Aylesford retreat in Kent, and then went to a couple more after that, and heard people step 5, so that was an honor to do that, and witnessed some amazing recoveries, I guess, or beginnings of recovery, and some magical experiences as well, which was lovely, and also very good to be with the group of people that understand you, and get it.
Well, absolutely. And so you've got that sort of background. That's why you're here talking with us. Our community is key. Yeah, I would go with that we've all come together in Came to Believe. And in fact, in the big book, it talks about that, you know, that one of the things about recovery is that people are like, that you start off like you're on a sinking ship. And it doesn't matter where you come from or what your level of interaction with recovery or with other people is, whether you're a rich person or somebody who has nothing. It talks about the captain at the captain's table, and then the people that are down in steerage, which would have been, you know, like the poorer people.
I love that.
And when you get into you know, when it's like when the Titanic sunk, it's like everybody ended up in the water together. So it doesn't matter where you come from, which links to stigma, doesn't it? You know, which we're going to
status, colour, culture, backgrounds, beliefs, faith. You know, it all goes out. You know, we've all got a common journey.
Yeah, we've got a common journey. And of course, it says that there's a common solution straight after that. But the other thing it says, which you've got like, which was just flashed up, was about community is key, is, I mean, that's quite, what it says after that is that usually if something like that happened, like a shipwreck, then people would end up walking away from each other. They'd probably hug each other and they'd survived, and they wouldn't come back together again. But we do in community. We come back together. That's what the big book sort of says is really unusual about us, that people from different backgrounds and different experiences all come together. So I think that's really, really, really interesting.
I've never heard of anything with that kind of spirit in it. Like like you just said, you know, the people, the shipwreck happens and they never see each other again. A bit like when it snows, and then all of a sudden everyone's helping each other in the community, and when it stops, they never speak to each other for a year.
Well, yeah, exactly. So yeah, but we come back together. You know, like in Came to Believe at retreats, we come back together. A lot of people return to help that have been to retreats to go and help others. People who've got the meetings as well. We have meetings, regular meetings. So, and obviously in AA and CA and NA and all those, they have meetings, but you know, as well.
Also, I've witnessed at witnessed at the retreats, people that have never been to any kind of meeting, and they're sort of on their knees and are brought directly to a retreat. People who have been through the program, and then I've experienced a woman who had been in the fellowship. I can't remember which one it was, for 20 years, and had done a step 5, and I call her crying around a corner, absolutely crying, and something had been brought up that had never come up in any of her step 10s, any of her program, and it came up there. So it doesn't have to be, you know, you can benefit from it even when you've been recovered for years. I've witnessed that. That's just what I witnessed. It was amazing. Bless her.
And I'm thinking about all these people that come together, and you wouldn't expect them to come together. And so our subject today, and I think it was displayed probably on anyone who's like looked on Facebook to see. Oh, by the way, I've just seen that Lisa has just said it snowed here 4 inches. So it's snowing over in New Jersey. I think you're in New Jersey. I'm sure she's in New Jersey, Lisa. I think she is, or she's that area. She'll probably tell me it's not. It's that area, and she'll go, no, it's not. But east, it's the east of the USA. So 4 inches of snow. So, but talking about stigma and culture, yeah, it's New Jersey. She's saying, yeah, it's New Jersey.
Hello, New Jersey.
Yeah. So, one of the things, can you read out what that definition of stigma was, and just the specific stuff related to addictions? That would be really interesting.
Yes, of course. So stigma, a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. So that is one definition. Another was a set of negative and unfair, interesting, beliefs that a society or people have about someone or something. And the sort of 3 things that seem to be represent stigma around addiction are that people think that the addict is just making poor personal choices for themselves, moral failings, so they're failing on their morals, defects of character are to blame, and I think that sort of leads into how do you reduce the stigma around it. And sort of 3 main things for me are education, which would overcome the 3 points that I just mentioned. Support, and that's getting the support, the right support, and also giving it once you've got it. And also being aware of your attitudes and behaviours, and that can work from both sides. So your attitudes and behaviours, the awareness around it, once you understand your disease and you've been through the programme. But that's also the attitudes and behaviours of recovered people. I guess attraction rather than promotion is probably one example of that. but the conditions that are stigmatized, number one is drugs. Alcohol rolls in at number 4.
Wow.
Then I didn't note them all down actually, but then you've got other ones like gender, race, sexual orientation, things like that. But yeah, drugs number 1, and it's crazy, isn't it? That's the number 1 stigmatized conditions. And I mean, since I came in to the program, on the surface, I would say there's way less stigma than there used to be, and we know that, but there is still so much, and that can go in work situations, sort of pockets of it, whether it be faith, cultural, employment, different things that can have a bit of stigma about addiction around it that people have to deal with. And I guess that's the sort of things that the program and Came to Believe help them with, because you don't know how to deal with it when you first come in.
No, absolutely, you just don't. And so in the UK, so you live in Dubai, and I live in the UK, and my sort of full-time work, because I go to Came to Believe, I volunteer to help Came to Believe, but I do work as well. I work in the in the field of drugs and alcohol, and also with hepatitis C, and if you look at sort of bloodborne viruses and stuff like that, there's a lot of stigma around HIV, Hep C, Hep B, any of those sort of illnesses, and they get linked in with injecting drug use and other forms of addiction, and the stigma, apparently there is like a self stigma where people like start, they actually think badly of themselves. It's like, I'm a really bad person. I'm a really, I'm an awful person because of what I've done or what I'm doing. And then there's also, like society stigma, where it would be like, for example, if you're going to start helping somebody in a local area where there's you're bringing people with addiction into a local area to meet up, you might get local the local community, or we don't want addicts in our area. So we've got addicts in our area. We don't want addicts in our area. Don't have them meeting near us. And that I've come across. And then there's a sort of just an overall, cultural, environmental, just a culture can be against addiction. And of course, so Sue Foreman has put, I get a kick out of the question, if addiction is a disease, why don't we have Diabetes Anonymous? And because it is, but that is quite an interesting.
Is it a mental disease as well?
No, but that's the point. You see, what Sue is saying is that why would if people are going to understand that addiction is a disease, then why don't you treat people by going to Diabetes Anonymous? But the reality is that's our medicine is the 12-step program. Our medicine is a 12-step program. The diabetics medicine is insulin. And what does it say in the big book? It says that that people that have cancer are not judged in the same way as an addict. We're just not judged in the same way as somebody who has cancer, and diabetes is the same thing. And the reality is that you need treatment for your diabetes. It's going to be there, but you can recover from it. You can recover from the symptoms of diabetes by having your regular insulin, whether by injection or by tablet. And with the 12-step program, you can work the 12-step program, you can work steps 10, 11 and 12 in your life daily. So that's your medicine. It's the same thing.
And also, I guess, like, you know, if you relate that to diabetes, someone's got diabetes, they found the medicine that works or whatever, or any disease, and they pass that knowledge on to others that have that, which is exactly what we need to do. And that's the most important thing. So others do learn about it, and then the stigma becomes less and less, hopefully.
Yeah. And Martin says at local hospital, they have many support groups not associated with any 12-step program. So, yeah. And, you know, people who have diabetes don't necessarily, I think everyone in the world could benefit from a 12-step program, but to be treated for diabetes, you would, you know, you might go to your support group to be with others so that you are together and helping each other. But the actual treatment for diabetes is insulin, is an insulin-based treatment. I don't know. I haven't worked in the area of diabetes. It wasn't my particular work. You know, that isn't the work that I've done. But with the 12 steps, but with stigma, I suppose going back to the idea, really, I'm just thinking with stigma, it's like if you've got diabetes or cancer, or you go to your local hospital, you go to your support group, but you don't tend to get the stigma against you that you would if you're an addict or an alcoholic. It's quite clear if it says that drugs is the top one for stigma and alcohol is the fourth one in the most stigmatized situations and conditions. I mean,
yeah, I think that's and I don't know, just my opinion of that is probably because there's more outward behavior and consequences from drug addiction, alcohol addiction, like, I don't know, fighting or stealing,
Yeah.
or, you know, that type of thing. So people outwardly see you not being a particularly nice person, or you're abusing, which I guess you don't do if you have those, which is probably why it's accepted, and alcohol and drugs they're struggling with. But I think there's still people don't see it as a disease. I mean, even when I talk to people and they accept it, but they do, you can see they don't get it. And why would they get it? You know, I didn't get it until I went through the program and I was taught it. But a normal person on the street is not going to do that.
And there is still in the drug and alcohol field, as I say, I work in that area. There is, you know, some who believe that it's all caused, addiction is all caused by, you know, life trauma and stuff like that. And to me, you know, what I've learned with myself, you know, my personal situation is that you know, I did have trauma in my life. Awful trauma. It was terrible trauma when I was younger. I can, you know, like abuse situations that were terrible in all levels and angles and everything. Now, I know that fueled my behavior and my addiction, you know, gave me an excuse and stuff like that. But my brother had the same situation in his life, but he's not an addict or an alcoholic. So, and he may well, you know, he might choose to say that he's got some damage that's come through that emotionally, but it's not the same because, you know, I was powerless over whether I, you know, drank or not. I was completely. And I've got a message here from Melissa. Melissa says she has an autoimmune condition that there's no treatment, but I take medication to prevent it from killing me, and taking suggestions from my hematology specialist. Just like there is no cure for alcoholism, but I can treat it by taking my medicine, the 12 steps. That's exactly. I'm following suggestions from those who have gone before me. Thanks, Melissa.
Yeah,
that's perfect, because you've got the perfect example because you have, that is your condition. It's a condition you have, which is a health condition, you know. So there is that misunderstanding of the difference between maybe somebody who's had a traumatic. You see, the thing is, trauma does play a role. There is no doubt in society today. I see that, but within drug and alcohol services, what I see, this is outside AA or CA or NA or Came to Believe, are all, the 12-step programs, is that there are some people who've had such awful things happen that they use drugs or alcohol to deal with the problem at the time. But our big book says, given a sufficient reason, they can stop or moderate, because there's sufficient reason. And they actually say things like warning of a doctor, falling in love, a change in life circumstances. But it didn't make any difference to me. I have the most beautiful son, and I had a baby. He was the most beautiful baby. I loved him as deeply as anything, but I couldn't stop drinking for him. And that's the difference between the person who is not powerless and of course, there's the stigma attached to that. Can you tell me a little bit about your experiences in Dubai with stigma, because you've got a different culture over there and etc.?
Yeah, well, actually, we've got 200 different cultures here, and just to put that into perspective, compared to, say, the UK, with a 69 million population, and the United Arab Emirates, with a 9 million population and 200 cultures. And, there's different faiths, different beliefs, different consequences within those, whether it be family ones related to faith and all that kind of thing. But 88% of the people here are expatriates from all over the world, Asia and the Americas, just all over the world, Australia's. And I mean, a couple of examples, I can be sitting in a meeting of 20 people, and there could be 15 different cultures in there, and a variety of faiths, and atheists and all, everyone, different kinds of people. And I always think that's so beautiful, because, the stigma obviously doesn't exist. And especially when a newcomer comes in, and we had a guy, a Muslim guy actually, who was in for a while and went back out and drank. He ended up in a hotel, locked himself in a hotel for 3 days, considering jumping off the balcony. Anyway, he somehow got caught and was locked up, because he was locked up for 37 days. And he has different consequences to, the South African or the Scot or the Brit. But what I really love is seeing them share. So he's back now. He's recovering. He's involved and passing the message on. It's just the light in people's eyes when they come into those rooms, and also go to the retreats when nobody is judging them. There is no stigma. The other stigma is around work. So Dubai is a very big drinking culture, massive drinking. There's not.
And that's interesting, because the Arab Emirates, I had the impression, and I've been now, but I had the impression no alcohol, not allowed to have alcohol. So that's interesting.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And the drugs is not spoken about, but it's definitely a problem. So I'm told, for sure. And other situations, employment, a newcomer, South African, came in, and this is a nice story, because her boss actually is in the program, which she didn't know, and he spotted it in her, and she's in the PR job, clients, she has to take them out. And when you go out in Dubai, everyone is drunk, because there isn't drugs openly, so they're really drunk. And she's got the support of her employer, but she's still got to deal with the stigma around not being able to tell her clients because they think that she won't be doing her job correctly, yet she's been recovered and she hasn't drunk for however long. So there's that kind of stigma. And teachers, without a doubt, absolutely anonymous, cannot, are not open. A lot of people are open about it here. Which again is all part of, I love to be open because the more people you tell, the more people you educate, the conversation, they can pass that on and on and on. And that's how people start to just learn a bit and maybe not create that stigma around it. But for teachers, because the schools are government, linked to the government and things like that, absolutely not. So it's really, really important. And then we've had bosses calling for advice because their staff are relapsing, and that's a tricky situation. But it's, you know, it's mixed. I don't see a lot of stigma around it here, if I'm honest, because a lot of people drink quite heavily, but they're not alcoholics.
Yeah.
And then when there's so many meetings and there's so much, it's very active. I mean, I don't know what it's like in the UK now, like there's coffee mornings and barbecues, and there's a Christmas brunch, which are 20 people from the fellowship. And what's lovely is there's a new meeting that opened quite a few months ago, and there's about 50 people in it. And it reminds me of one in the UK or the US, with the steps up and all of that kind of thing, and the coffees and, you know, all this kind of stuff, and speakers, yeah, really good. And that's now on every single day. And then the venue has also allowed them to, they've given them so many hours. So if sponsors want to go in and do their work with their sponsor in their rooms, they've allowed that. So it's good. And a lot of them are in offices as well.
Oh, isn't that good that there's, you know, I think these strong meetings, you know, so that I came to believe, you know, the strong retreats, strong meetings and came to believe, but also in, you know, fellowships in AA. And when you get a strong meeting where there's, you know, the program, which comes from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, when that program is being, you know, passed on, meetings do grow, you know, they get stronger, but you get more people that are able to sponsor people. They might have been to a retreat and then been able to recover, and or they might have gone through the big book. It's the same. I mean, that's what we do at the retreats, is we take people through the program as the founders originally did. And I think that's what you do at your meeting. You've been part of that, haven't you, Vanessa, in getting that set up? I thought, because when you first went over there, you've brought together a lot of women, haven't you, and passed on the message.
Yeah, we set up a ladies' meeting, and then, I mean, I have sponsees, and do service and just continue. And I dip out, not often, but every now and again. But he sticks a knife in my stomach, and I go back and do more.
I love that. He so God is God got you there, and he got you out there carrying the message. The thing I know that God's involved with all that with you, Vanessa, is that you're a very busy businesswoman, and I know you are, but you always have during that time continued to help other people and pass people on the message of how to recover. So that's you've done that. I wanted to now, we've got the virtual retreat has just been spoken about, and we will talk about that in a second. Actually, I wanted to let people know a little bit more. I wanted to turn people, if they can, if you're watching here, and even if you've been around a while, if you haven't been around a while, if you're actually watching this and you're thinking, okay, well, I'm a business person. I work in in those early days. So Bill Wilson, he was, he was a stockbroker, and he was involved with, it was all to do with business, and it was all to do with that sort of drinking culture and stuff around there, which he budding alcoholic, and he grew through there into that. So that the people in those early days of founders, they were quite often, that you'll see in the big book, like the terminology is about business people, and they'll say, like, go into his office, somebody might throw you out of the office and all that. And today isn't everyone that's working in an office, but that was the environment they were in. But there's on page 136 of the big book, it's called To Employers, and it's really, I know, this is in my big book, which I've had since my first retreat, which is really, show your big book. Yours is like that as well, isn't it?
Coffee stains, unglued.
So
I won't get rid of it. It got me wet to where I am today, and hopefully will get me wherever I'm going.
Yeah, well, you're going to continue to be a recovered woman, because you keep helping others, and yeah, well, it's good, and it's great. I was just showing those big books because that is the book I went through at the original retreat, and I'm still using it. And you said to me earlier that you were given a new big book by somebody, but you can't give up that book, because that was the book that you went through when you first went
with you.
Yeah,
you probably bought me this book because I probably didn't have any money at the time, so I'd wrapped up a load of debt.
Yeah, well, there you are. Now you've got your own business. So there you go. That's what God can do for people. So, but page 136, To Employers of the big book, is really interesting. I thought I'd have a read of it before we came on tonight, because I'm thinking about employment stigma. And you spoke there about, like teachers, they've got to be really careful and not, in that particular culture, there's lots of different countries, with high levels of alcoholism. But basically, most people have got like your own self stigma. You've got like how society treats it, and then there's like the environment and the culture, which makes a difference. But To Employers is really interesting, because he's a guy who's an employer, and he's talking about how he was judging on page 136 that this guy had really got on his nerves. He was always drinking, and he thought that he was getting a phone call, and he wanted to get a message, and he was thinking it was going to be a message that would be like, oh, can you let him off again because he's drunk again, like off work. And the quote at the bottom of the page is that the person that was ringing up this employer, Hank Parkhurst, I just wanted to tell you that Paul jumped from a hotel window in Hartford last Saturday. He left us a note saying you were the best boss he had ever had, and that you were not to blame in any way. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then he says, that was the obituary of one of one. And then there was another salesman. After 2 weeks of drinking, he had placed his toe on the trigger of a loaded shotgun. The barrel was in his mouth. I had discharged him for drinking 6 weeks before. So what he's saying is that before he, and then he ends up an alcoholic, and he's a recovered alcoholic. He had quite a lot of influence, Hank. He wrote To Employers, and he was very much engaged with Bill, I think, up in New York. And then it goes on. So he talks about all these people who, and everything, like the type of thing that Melissa has shared with us about this being an illness which you need treatment, you need the 12 steps. He's saying the same. But what he's saying is he's given some advice. He's saying you don't just let someone off the hook and say, oh, well, you're ill, that's all right. He says you've got to look after your business. But he says, introduce people to these 12 steps. And the way that, one of the things Came to Believe are trying to do is to, I met up with a guy just recently from who's working with one of the big organizations, really like a massive organization within the UK. And he's been taken on as a rehabilitation and and he's going into prisons, and he's carrying the message of, you know, that people can be rehabilitated. And so I was talking to him about the retreats and about, you know, the fact that people could be told, like, you know, they came to believe, or AA, or if they need to work a 12-step program if they are powerless, you know, if they're not reacting to a personal situation, which once it gets sorted out, they'll be all right. You know, if they're like me, totally unable not to drink, they're going to need a 12-step program. And this is what Hank then goes on in this chapter. It's only a few pages. It goes on until I'm just going to see how far to page 150 of the big book. So 136 to 150. And he's got on page 142, he says that, you know, this is to the employer. He says, once you get talking to somebody, so on page 142, he says, at this point, it might be well to explain alcoholism, you know, to this person who keeps drinking. The illness. Say that you believe he's gravely ill, perhaps a person with this qualification, perhaps being fatally ill. Does he want to get well? You ask, because many alcoholics being warped and drugged do not want to quit. But does he? Will he take every necessary step, submit to anything to get well, to stop drinking forever? And, you know, I'm just sort of, you know, that message, this is back in the 1930s. It's still the same message, really, in work situation, isn't it? Vanessa, what would you do if you had, because you've got, you know, people work for you and they were not turning up and you thought they might be an alcoholic? What would you do?
Well, I'm very open with all my staff. They know that I'm in the program, and I think it's important too. I'm fortunate that I can't lose my job because of it. And but me and my business partner did have a conversation about it when we set up the business. But of course, I would talk to them about my experience and try and get them along to a meeting so they can decide for themselves. I'd support them.
And what is your process for support? What do you do when you 12-step someone?
God, it depends. I mean, I'll talk to them about myself and my experience. So in hope that they may see some similarities, make them understand that only they can decide whether they're alcoholic or not. So just come along and see if you have any similarities and decide for yourself. I don't really have a list of things that I do that I can think of at the end of the week on a Friday night, 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock in Dubai. Yeah, but you have sponsored, you have 12-step quite a few people, haven't you? Where you've had to sit down with them and work. So, I
mean, I give them no. Sorry, I'm thinking of sponsorship. No.
Yeah, no, it's the same thing though. Surely, if you were going to talk to somebody, and you're not going to push them, are you? You know what I mean?
Ask for a sober day. So I do ask them if they've ever prayed or anything, and the majority of people have. When I say to them, have you ever been in a situation, whether it be you've got into trouble and you're like, please get me out of this, or you've been at a hospital bedside of someone, is please make sure they're all right. Whoever that is that you're talking to, for now, just pray to that and ask them for a sober day. And if you have a sober day, thank them at the end of the night for a sober day, gratitude list. And if you haven't had a sober day, ask them at that point, unless they have God in their life. And I can't remember. There's a list of things.
Yeah, so you went through working with others. We read through that, didn't we, about how to work with people in the big book, which is the one of the chapters in the big book, and it talks, doesn't it, about you don't try and push and prod people to do things that they don't want to do. I suppose that's really what I was saying. You know,
Yeah, I mean, you can't. They'll just run a mile, or they'll think it's a cult of, you know, the amount of people that come in. And we all say it. I was the same. The suspicion, like when you start hearing all these things, and I think it's just so important that there's so many people sharing, going to the meetings, the different personalities, just like in life, generally. Different people get on with different people, they warm to different people. And, you know, it's important that people recover through the program. In my the only way I got well was the program through the big book, and pass that message on. But that's, I mean, it's magical how it even exists. You know.
yeah. I mean, one of the things that I remember being told at the beginning was, "Oh right, yeah. I'm just gonna I'll go on to Martin's. Just put a message on. You know, you used the word magical, and I'm just thinking of the word miracle. You know, and it was a miracle, really, of what happened, about the fact that the message originally in the 1930s, the way things worked out. I mean, Clarence Snyder always says that it was very strange how Dr. Bob was in one part of the country as a doctor, and then he found out that he knew Bill Wilson's brother-in-law. So he'd like met Dr. Bob, and then he found out that, so Bill Wilson's the other end of the country. They're 600 miles apart, and yet he's in the middle of it, and he doesn't understand that actually what's been done is that God has placed people in a certain position, and it's miraculous. And I remember somebody saying to me once, you know, I wonder how many times God was like, because we've all got free will, haven't we, to be able to decide what we do or don't. You know, how many people were given a chance, you know, to bring this together so that this program could be rolled out among people. I'm just looking, because I was saying earlier about working in the area in hepatitis C. Yeah. So, oh, Martin, thanks for sharing that with me. Yeah, I work with them Martin has just been sharing about his own experience, you know, with hepatitis C, and he learned to look after himself as well. And I'm just wanting to say, you know, grace, mercy, and love to you too, and the guidance of the Holy Spirit, Martin. Yeah, that's just amazing that you managed to recover, and that's what I worked. That's the area I work in. In fact, I was saying, I don't know whether I said it to you. I think I was saying to somebody earlier that, you know, that I can honestly say that when I stopped drinking, one of the things I felt that I know I was meant to do was to go and do this work that I do with people who have Hep C, and I've been doing that now since 2009. And yeah, thanks, Martin. It is a divine appointment, and I've been working with bringing a route map to bring all the organisations together so that more people, especially people who are not who are finding services difficult to reach, and they're like homeless people or people still injecting drugs or whatever, that they can access treatment. It's over and above, you know, what I do on the 12 steps. So I do that as well. So there you go. So thanks. I'm very moved that you would share that, Martin. Thank you for being so honest on here. And, you know, I'm glad I mentioned it. Well, in these last sort of 10 minutes, I wanted to sort of, I just wondered what our sort of takeaways are really from our discussion. You know, I'm just thinking that, you know, like stigma. So with stigma, you know, how does that affect? Education is key. That's been brought up. You brought that up before. So you read out that education. Where was it that you saw that education is key? It's not, we know that. Where did you read that? Is that something you picked up when you were doing your research? before?
I can't remember, but I mean, I've always believed in that, which is why I was very lucky to have always been open. And I guess, you know, found AA through a rehab that my employer paid for. So I had a good start. Not everyone has that. My employer thought I was an alcoholic, so they paid for my rehab, and I started the journey from there. So that's why I've always been open about it. And educating people are interested, you know, because everybody knows someone who they think is alcoholic or drinks alcoholically. I think, I think there's a bit of sort of I don't know whether stigma is the right word, is when someone has recovered and goes back into the workplace, almost like, and I've heard people speaking about someone in a workplace that has recovered when they've maybe been off sorts one day or they're off sick. He's probably drunk.
Exactly. I just saw that in two employers. He was saying that he's saying you might, you know, start being a bit suspicious, but if the person is doing the stuff, you know, like following the suggestions, going to the meetings, not so much going to the meetings, because it was actually more about working the program in those days. Meetings were just for carrying the message. But he was saying, you know, if you can see the person's willing, believe them, you know, actually believe them. And then he says, if they relapse, you know, even once, you have to make a decision about, does the person really want this? You know, and you need to look after your business. You may need to finish their employment.
Well,
you might.
Like the guy who was calling me, and I passed him on to other men, and there were a group of men trying to help this guy, and the guy owned the business, and the guy that was struggling was going into when he was relapsing, he was going into the workplace and abusing people in the workplace. And I remember having the conversation with him, and he said, I don't know what to do, because he's such a good guy, you know, I know his wife, and he was trying to get him into a rehab or in South Africa, but away from the workplace. But in the end, he probably would have had to get rid of him.
Yeah.
And but he really didn't want to, because he understands, he's not an alcoholic, but he understands through people like me sharing and explaining, you know, the disease. He understands as much as he can about the disease in order to help this guy and not give up on him. But yeah, you're right. There is a point, isn't there, for an employer?
It's the tough one, and you know, yeah. But that chapter, and in fact, if you are a recovered alcoholic or somebody who's knows an alcoholic, say if you're somebody who's in the family, etc., to employers is quite interesting, because it sort of gives quite a good breakdown of how to, you know, deal with how to approach things. In sponsorship, I found it a very useful chapter about how to sponsor people, because sometimes you have to say to somebody, look, I can't help you really anymore, because you don't really want to do this, you know, do the program. And I found that so hard at the beginning, because I just wanted everyone to get this, because it's so brilliant, you know.
But you know what, that you have to do that to an extent, you know, with everyone, and it's that go to the bar room, isn't it, and have another drink and see if you can just have one type thing. And you know, a lot of the things the only thing I didn't lose was my job, but I was just about to, I think.
You were. I remember you had lost everything when I met you.
Everything. License, mind, everything. And I was clinging on to the job, and I actually chose to leave it. So I didn't lose it, and also get out of that industry altogether. I've forgotten where I was going with that, actually. So my apologies. What were we talking about? I forgot. Well, let's memory cells.
Well, maybe some brain cells did get a bit destroyed I did do an awful lot of drinking for about 35 years. So Even though it's 21 years on, I think that they don't all go back as well as they did. But what I do actually think, I actually do believe this, is that the power of the program, which is the power of my creator, that God created me, created my brain. I do believe he's put things back together. I actually do believe he's actually
totally,
he's brought back
more
things,
than ever.
yeah,
and given access to other parts that had never been used.
yeah.
I'm an intelligent girl. I kind of thought I was, but I never used it. Didn't know how to.
Yeah.
Never thought beyond, well, like, you know, all of us, beyond, well, the next drink, the next party, the next, you know, and now I think beyond, well, economies, politics, finance, you know, it's just was never in my head.
Yeah.
I love it. I love what this opens up for you.
I love it too. And well, we're coming out to Christmas. I don't have any fear about alcohol. I have a few things going on about trying to organize certain things, and life goes on, and you know, difficult days happen, don't they? And we have to face real difficulties in our lives. But you know, I don't have to fear that I will drink again. And I just want to really say about stigma is that you know, that we have to accept that there is stigma out there. So all that we can do is that we don't do that, and that we can educate people to learn about this big book, and learn about you know, learn about how to recover. And Martin is sharing with us, you know, various things. And it says, when the spiritual malady, page 64, it says, when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. So I'd like to sort of end on that the spiritual malady, which is all those sort of outcomes of the drinking, which is like all that bad behavior and stuff that people might see that creates, and our own self-stigma against ourselves. It says, when the spiritual malady is overcome through the 12 steps, it says we will straighten out mentally and physically. So the thinking that precedes the drink or the drug, that is straightened out by our creator, by God, by this lovely, beautiful power that cares and wants us healed. And we straighten out physically because we no longer want to put it into our body. And so I am blessed by God's grace. And I'm also blessed to have you as a friend, and that this is like an opportunity to be together on here and discuss these things. And maybe, you know, maybe I have been of more help. It's been more of help to me to speak about this than I'm being of help to anyone. That's really
well,
it.
you were a great attraction for me. You were the only attraction after 3 years of constantly relapsing and losing everything in my mind. From the festival.
Yeah.
I'm just to a festival.
Yeah, I've been out and about. So
without a drink, do you take drugs then? You just have drugs when you go there. You're like, no. I don't advise it for you, but eventually.
God's grace. We'll have to finish now. So we're just going to say goodbye to everybody.
Bye-bye,
we'll be back. Recovery Live will be back with Tom next week. And I hope you've been able to enjoy our comfort. Yeah. And I hope you've been able to enjoy today and the discussion. And if it's been of help to anyone, then it's worthwhile. Bless you. Bye-bye.
Bless you.